ですか？えっと星崎さんちょっと
Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. So, embargo has lifted on Blue Reflection Second Light, the sequel to Blue Reflection. You can go and check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net right now. And I do go in depth into why I love this game, but the point I want to make here is that I really, really love this game. It is one of my favorites of 2021, if not overall, and I really don't have a bad thing to say about it. I think it is a remarkable, beautiful, heartfelt and ethereal piece of art, and something that manages to straddle the line between being something of its own. It is a very distinctive work that is not quite like anything else that you would play out there in the JRPG genre, but at the same time, it is also a game that speaks to JRPG fans especially, and as somebody who has been playing the JRPG since as far back as I can remember, the systems that are in this game also appeal to me and anybody else who is a fan of traditional JRPGs. So Gus and Koei Tecmo have found a way of telling a really beautiful story, making sure that their game is distinctive, original and its own thing, but also making sure that it appeals to JRPG fans as well. I hope that this game is going to be a success, especially since the first one wasn't, and this is probably the last roll of the dice for Blue Reflection. I really hope that it does prove itself, because I think there's plenty of potential here for them to do some more work with Blue Reflection, and I would love to see them have the chance to, if that is on the agenda. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the future of the Blue Reflection property. We're here to talk about Second Light in particular, and I want to use this video to talk about one thing within the game that I think is particularly remarkable and really worth talking about. You can check out my review for all my broad thoughts, but in this video we're going to talk about aesthetics. So I think we need to have a serious discussion about technical detail versus artistic direction when it comes to determining what counts as good graphics in video games. And Blue Reflection and its sequel, Second Light here, represent my own thoughts on the subject in a really elegant way. So often when we're reading reviews or social media posts or user comments or whatever else it happens to be, when we see the term good graphics pop up, we kind of know exactly what they're referring to. And it is almost always talking about the detail that goes into a game, the technical detail, and that usually means AAA games. So people are thinking about things like Assassin's Creed or Ratchet and Clank or God of War or Red Dead Redemption or GTA or whatever else. Those kind of big blockbuster experiences where the visuals are very complex and very detailed and kind of larger than life and look great in 4K and all that kind of stuff. And I'm certainly not suggesting that those games are not attractive on the eye, because they are. They've had so much money thrown at them, it would be a big problem if they weren't pleasing on the eye. But the thing that I've always found with them is that they're also quite transposable. So you could take the characters of God of War and stick them in an Assassin's Creed game and they wouldn't look out of place at all. Or you could take the characters of Ratchet and Clank and stick them in God of War's environments, and while you would probably need to cartoon up the environments and certainly the enemy design a little bit, they are still quite transposable. These things are so hyper detailed and so technically complex, but they're also very homogenized, because that is where technical detail goes. It's all about best practice and making sure that you're delivering according to what best practice suggests. Art direction is a very different thing. Art direction is where you get games that have a distinctive vision that is separate from other games. Art direction is where Blue Reflection comes in, because no other game will ever look like Blue Reflection. And it might not be the most technically detailed game you'll ever play, but it is certainly the only game of its type that you will ever play. To give you an idea of just how important art direction was to Blue Reflection, in the lead up to the game's release, a couple of journalists, including myself, was given the opportunity to chat to Mel Kishida, the artist that was behind the character designs within the game. It's really quite unusual for us to get access to artists to talk to you. Usually when we talk to developers about a game, it's the producer or the director that you get access to, because they have a kind of broad oversight over the entire project. They're also often the ones that have been media trained, so they're generally the ones put up for the interview. It's not that often you get to talk to an artist that worked on the game, but Mel Kishida is so well known as being attached to Blue Reflection. It is kind of his project. So when people who are in the know with Blue Reflection talk about it, it's often talked about as a Mel Kishida project first and foremost. He certainly had input to the rest of the game, to hear him talk about it based on that interview, but really his main role was coming up with the character designs and the enemy designs and the kind of the visual setting for the game. So even though Blue Reflection didn't have a massive budget behind it in terms of its graphics, and it certainly doesn't look like an Assassin's Creed or a God of War or a Horizon or any of those other AAA blockbusters, it is nonetheless a game that is first and foremost a very visual experience in which the art is the one that is kind of meant to stand out and give the game its distinctive feel. What is unfortunate is that Blue Reflection Second Light is also going to be dismissed for those same reasons, because it doesn't look like a AAA game. It is going to be chalked up by a lot of people as having bad graphics. It is certainly not going to get Visual Game of the Year at most of the mainstream game awards. It is not going to be the game that people that hold up to say, hey, look how good video games can look. These are things that are just not going to happen, and the reason for that is because it doesn't have the technical level of detail behind it. That's not to say that it isn't a technically proficient game. I never noticed frame rate drops as I was playing, for example. While I'm not the best person in the world to talk about that, I think it runs pretty smoothly, and certainly the environments and whatever do have a nice level of detail in them. There's a bit of pop-up with some of the busier or more complex environments, but for the most part it is a perfectly pleasant game to look at in a technical level. But because it's not that AAA hyper-detailed Horizon thing, there are going to be people that dismiss it on that basis, which is really unfortunate, like I said. And it comes back to the discussion that I think we need to have in this industry. Which one are we going to value more? Do we value technical detail as indicative somehow of artistic brilliance? Or do we recognize that art direction is equally as important, if not more so? I would suggest that art direction is the more important of the two. That's not to suggest that technical proficiency isn't important. If you can't meet a minimum standard of technical proficiency, then your game is going to be pretty hard to look at all. And if people can't look at it, how are they going to get the message from it? So certainly you need to hit that minimum standard so that people actually look at the work. But once they are looking at the work, there needs to be something you can take out of it. And if all you've got is technical proficiency, if all you've got is that kind of really detailed but visually kind of mind-blowing experience, then you are limiting your work. What you're going to have is something that is very impressive at the time, but over time it ages badly. When we talk about games aging badly, it's not because they're actually getting old, because art doesn't get old. Good art is forever, as the Mona Lisa and Shakespeare will prove to you. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years of those works still being very relevant to us. So good art is timeless. But if all you've got is technical proficiency, you haven't really got art. You've just got something that is an interesting exhibition of what can be achieved at the time. You've got a show, and a show can be a lot of fun, but over the long term, I don't think it's going to be particularly memorable. And certainly every single game that we've seen that has relied on technical proficiency over any kind of depth has not lasted the test of time. And we're already seeing some games that were amazingly impressive at the time, like Crisis or some of the early Killzone games. Those games that really relied on their technical brilliance at the time, those are the games that we talk about having aged. And it's not because the games themselves have got old, like I said. It's just because once you scratch below that technical surface, there's not that much to them. They really were just products of their time as such. And they don't have that timelessness because they don't have anything to say beneath it. So art direction is a very important part of the message that a game wants to convey. And if the only thing that the game wants to convey is that, hey, it's the most detailed thing that's out there, then it's only going to last as the most detailed thing out there until the next game comes along. And if I was working on these games, not that I have the massive budgets to work on a Crisis game or even a Blue Reflection, but if I was designing a game, I would want to make sure that my game was going to stand the test of time, not just be a product for the now, but something that people will be able to continue to discover and talk about and find inspiring for many generations down the track. And I think that's what Blue Reflection is. To me, anyway, it represents the vision of art, video games as an art form, that they are not just about having the most detailed graphics, but they're about using those graphics to tell us something. And really, Blue Reflection, Second Light's graphics tell us a lot. They really carry the game's heartfelt messages, its emotional core, its kind of ethereal beauty, which is distinctive, original. And like I said, there is no other game out there that is like Blue Reflection. And for that reason, it is just this most memorable thing. I have never forgotten the original Blue Reflection. To this day, I talk it up as the most beautiful game of all time. I guess it has kind of been replaced now. It has a sequel out there, but, well, it hasn't been replaced. I guess that's kind of the point of this video. They stand side by side. Blue Reflection is still everything as beautiful and playable as its sequel, but these two games are both just the most amazing works of art, and they will stick with me for a long time into the future precisely because they put art direction over technical brilliance. Anyhow, that is enough for this video. I have rambled on long enough. Please, again, check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net. I promise you I have written enough words in praise of this game that talk about a lot of other stuff and not just the visual stuff. Do let me know your own thoughts in the comments, and please do mash that like and subscribe button if you enjoyed this video. That way you won't miss any of mine into the future. And if you do want to support what we're doing at digitallydownloaded.net, please consider backing me on Patreon. You can do so for $1 a month or a little bit more if you're feeling generous. And in return for that, not only do you support the growth of this channel and the DDNet website, but you also get a digital magazine every month. It's a 48-page magazine, and we go into all kinds of interesting things about Japanese games and culture. So not just video games, but we also talk about film and music and food and drinks and history and all that other stuff. And it gives you a good insight into not just the Japanese games industry, but also Japan and how it has produced games that can be as beautiful and heartfelt as the likes of Blue Reflection. All right, everybody, enjoy Blue Reflection Second Light. It is a great week when we get a new Blue Reflection game. Hopefully it's not the last time this happens, and we will see you at the next video.
バレエの指導を受けるためにこの町に来てたんだ。今日で指導は終わりだから帰らなくちゃいけない。そうだったんだ。そんな顔しないで。いつかまた来るから。続けることを選んだんでしょ。それならまたここで会える。その時はさ、いつもみたいに迎えてくれると嬉しいな。はい、約束します。そう、約束したんだ。次に会った時はあの言葉で迎えるって。最後にもう一回聞かせて。結構好きなんだ。志保の出迎えの言葉。 めん、お店に入ったつもりはないんだけど。ひなこだよね。あなたたちは？記憶がないんだね。私のこと何か知ってるの？少しだけ。伝えられることは少ないけど。私たちに分かる範囲で答えます。